So I gotta follow that. It's a little unfair. But that's okay. This is home turf for me. I kind of teach in this classroom, so it works for me fine. The purpose of the stuff that I'm presenting today, to my mind, is to sort of inform each of your individual processes in terms of what you think about the current and potential uses of technology in your respective areas, classrooms, etc. And my particular aims in putting all of this together is for further publication at a later date, so that's in the works. But I entitled it the connectivity paradox because that's exactly what it is. Certainly in the experience of an individual who uses technology, how many of us have found ourselves in the midst of something we're supposed to be paying attention to, and oh look, I just got a text and it came in, and like 3 of you guys are doing it right now. And then you're like, oh yeah, I'm multitasking, honest, and it's not possible. And as somebody who works in the field of psychology and cognition, it's always really fascinating to me to encounter in a very meta way while I'm talking about this stuff and experiencing it from students. So some of the information that I'm going to be covering today has a little bit to do with what the literature says about these different areas that a lot of us run into. In case it's been a hard week, I'm reminding you of paradox. So the connectivity paradox is given that we have so much at our disposal that connects us very literally in ways that we could never have been connected as much as 5 years ago. We now find that that connectivity is actually getting in the way of connecting on a face-to-face basis. And obviously for situations in a classroom, that's really problematic. Now, the research that's been done, as in pretty much all the research that you run into in the social sciences, you're going to find support for and against just about everything. But it's nice to take a survey and look on occasion and then pick your poison. The different research being contradictory means that, I guess the take home, and I'll just give it to you in preview style now, is that you sort of have to customize according to your individual needs. Whenever needs arise, you look at the research and you follow accordingly. But each classroom situation is going to be different from the next, and so it's not a simple matter of plugging in basic precepts and this is going to work for everybody. Now, the things that I'll be covering today is the current climate, very briefly, some of the stuff that's out there on cognition when it comes to technology use, attention, the methods that are out there in a very general scope kind of way, and whether or not they're working and how they're working, and then some very brief suggestions on how we can take that information and plug it into our individual needs in a classroom setting. So right now what we're dealing with is that digital natives, the vast majority of students that we work with, they have their own opinions of what is necessary for them to be good students from the technologically side. Not that they're not entirely wrong in a lot of that, but they're wrong in a lot of that. They all seem to be in vast agreement. 85% of students would say that a laptop is pretty valuable to being a good student and getting things done. Tablets are on the rise. Smartphones are starting to get up there. I don't know how many of you have had the experience of having a paper submitted to you that was entirely written on a phone. That's happening to me more and more, and you sort of roll with it because sometimes they don't have any other means and they're on the subway and they got to get the thing done. And you'd be surprised at how good it can turn out. But you know, U instead of YOU tends to happen a bit. And then of course there are ebook readers, and those are not interchangeable by definition with tablets because tablets have a little bit more diversity of use, whereas an ebook reader is a little more specific to ebooks with a little bit of internet browsing capability but less storage. Students will tell you pretty much on average that I've experienced in asking my students sort of in preparation for this, that they want more accessibility to. So, but here's the kicker. Smartphones are not academic tools in the general sense of the way we use them. So to say, all right guys, there's an app for this, you can put it into your phone, and now you can read your text, now you can do all this academic stuff. It's a lovely notion, but it's not necessarily going to work out in practice for a lot of these students because cell phone does not equal work. Matter of fact, cell phone more than likely equals the opposite of work, right? So nearly half of the usage that people in general, students and not, are using their cell phones for have nothing whatsoever to do with working. And to expect students to use them for work might be a stretch for some. Now, there is also this. We do ask a lot of some people, and I know it seems a little silly, but let's be real here. This is real. It exists. Some of you might actually, be honest with yourselves, suffer from homophobia. It is a real legitimate anxiety that comes from not being around your phone. So to ask a student to relinquish their phone for that 50 to 90 minute period of time that they belong to you might actually be painful. And it's real. Not only that, but consider the fact that we're dealing with a group of people who is particularly impacted by this sort of thing. 67% of reported homophobics are between the ages of 18 and 24. Well, that's great. And there are lots of other technologies that show up in classrooms, but these are the ones that pop up readily when you ask for, opinions. This is stuff that has been in classrooms a while. Nobody is surprised with PowerPoints now. If you don't have a PowerPoint, what's wrong with you kind of thing. Videos, that sort of thing, been around for a while. I put clickers on this side because frankly clickers have been around for a while, but they're getting better. And then on the other side, these are things that are emerging and becoming more popular in academic settings, partly because it's tough to plug that into an academic setting, but it's coming along. Cell phones, for instance, can now be used in certain examples as clickers. So rather than departments having to spend money, you can actually get an app, download it, and different publishers provide this service. And you can actually use a cell phone for a clicker. Unfortunately, what makes you think they're just looking at the clicker app, right? So that's part of the stuff that we deal with. Now the cognition part, we are looking at cognition being just the stuff you do with your brain. And for the purposes of education, we're dealing with interpreting, manipulating, and using knowledge. A lot of the research that goes into tech usage and learning employs information processing theory. And it's lovely because it's kind of based on a computer model, meaning if we can make a computer solve problems and we can chart out how the computer did it, that might give us some insights into how we do it in our minds. So it's been a very handy device for understanding cognition. Now, when it comes to the benefits on cognition, we see that classroom technology does contribute to what's called an enhanced learning environment. In developmental circles, we talk about it a lot among children, but once you're older, it's still kind of lovely to have a lot going on. The drawbacks, mostly the drawbacks come down to the fact that we already have a limited amount of working memory that we're working with. Information that goes into short-term or working memory ends up being inaccurate or incomplete when we are dually listening and using technology. There's a lot going on. That leads to attention, of course. Now, I think that had anybody ever heard that saying that people only have 10 to 15 minutes of attention? And it just sort of got circulated. Well, I was looking through the research and that's just nowhere to be found. I don't know who started it. That's sort of like you only use 10% of your brain. That doesn't exist either. But somewhere, somehow, that little rumor got started and it's a fat lie. When we talk about attention, by the way, when you're talking about sustained attention, we call that vigilance. And that's what we would love to have more of, but human beings, I don't care how young or old you are, we all have our limits to that. Also, it helps if you have a higher arousal level. Higher arousal level means you're going to maintain some of this information a little better. So, here's the deal. I don't want to be bleak, but I'm going to be bleak. You're losing people in the first 30 seconds of your lecture.
Sure.
Right? Beyond that, wait another 4 to 5 minutes, you're going to lose them again. That pattern is going to continue And then by the time you're at the end of a 50 to 90-minute lecture, you're losing them every single 2 minutes. So much fun to teach. So that's really valuable knowledge. So again, no idea where 10 to 15 minutes came from. That's a pipe dream. So you would think, okay, we'll just plug in technology. Technology will help us, right? That's cute. It does help us in that we know technology gives us more periods of vigilance in terms of the number of periods of vigilance. It doesn't say anything about the distractions, right? But they'll tune in more often. And the arousal can be triggered with technology, so that's nice. But if you've got a kid on a laptop, and you can't watch what's going on the laptop, just rest assured it's not what you want. When you have somebody, so the studies that work on this stuff, they split it up. Half the students use laptops for note-taking and half don't, and the ones who do inevitably bomb. And they will swear up and down, oh, my notes are so much better, I can type far better than I write. That's cute, but you suck on your quiz. So that kind of thing is consistent across the board whenever we see the research. And also, one more thing about digital natives, they are convinced beyond any doubt that they are marvelous at multitasking. You try to have a conversation, and then they're like, yeah, I'm totally listening to you. They're not capable of it, but they really do believe it. So something that you were saying earlier about respecting how people learn, this is kind of part of the pudding. They believe it, so it's not going to do any good to call them out on it. They're busy texting anyway, and they don't believe you. But the truth of the matter is they don't have capacity for multitasking on that level. So it helps to know that. Now, we have had some successes. For instance, interactive technologies have been great for aiding in retention when used appropriately. And also we've noticed that online tools, especially publishers, have gotten on board with a lot of online learning and online tools, and some of those have been good. And then of course the blended learning classrooms and models have been a nice way to try to transition into a more tech-savvy way of teaching. But yeah, so given that everybody is using smartphones, we can sort of make this leap that the research is showing us, which is if you use mobile devices extensively, you have a higher likelihood, this is correlative of course, but you have a higher likelihood to have a lower GPA. So higher use, lower GPA, negative correlation. Facebook users have lower GPAs in general, unfortunate, maybe I should get rid of my account. And you know, we are also finding that 40% of people who have all these lovely things that are provided by have to be focused on the clicking, and you have to be involved in that procedure. So that helps in terms of cognition and processing. This ugly 3-minute segment of time that you have to work with while it occurs can also be a blessing in the knowledge of it. So you can time the things that you do accordingly, including the insertion of technology. And finally, understanding digital natives and the way that they deal with technology, whether or not it actually helps them, they swear by it. So it's a good idea to jump on the bandwagon and try to find a way to access them on their terms. So now we're looking at how do we apply this stuff in our individual cases. Again, you can't throw a blanket over everything. You have to sort of look at it on a case-by-case basis. So ideally, you would find some lovely innovators and people who work in the field who happen to be professionals, and then have them come and consult, right? And feeding back and forth between minds, kind of, gee, I don't know, people at a conference who are talking about this, that never happens. You can start to build this information and customize it. Because a big problem is, yes, many faculty members are digital immigrants, but many are not. So talking to one another is a big help. But I was surprised to see how little information is out there in the literature when it comes to understanding the learning patterns of digital natives. So I really do think that that's the next step. And